Hello and welcome to pmclounge.com. In this video, let's talk about planning poker, which is used for estimation. So Scrum teams like to use planning poker for estimation of story points, and that's how they basically estimate the user stories. So we'll take a look at that. If you're into reading articles, first link in the description is going to take you to an article on this topic over at our official website pmclounge.com, so you can check that out. Also, second link is going to be a playlist of all the videos that we have done on Agile. Those videos are going to help you out if you're preparing for your PMP exam. The Agile part of your PMP exam will be covered with the help of that playlist. And third link, if you're preparing for PMI ACP, we have specific videos for PMI ACP as well. So check those links out whenever you feel like. For now, let's get ahead and understand planning poker for estimation. Request you to hit the like button and help us spread the word about PMC Lounge. So let's start off with the good old why is this important question? Why should you be reading planning poker? I talked about how it is a popular method. I talked about how a lot of Scrum teams actually use planning poker to estimate the efforts required to build the user stories. Now remember, we don't have a requirement specification document as far as agile projects that are delivered in agile environment go, right? Projects that are delivered in using the Scrum way, uh, you don't really have a requirement specifications document. All you have are user stories, and you need to have a way to estimate the efforts required to deliver those user stories. So this is why planning poker is important, because that is the method used to estimate the efforts. Estimation is usually done in the sprint planning meeting. If you've forgotten what sprint planning is, second link in the description, the playlist that is going to contain a lot of videos that are going to help you out here if you're sort of lost your way, right? If you don't know what sprint planning is, if you don't know what user stories are, then second link, that playlist is definitely going to help you out. So sprint planning is where this planning poker uh, exercise takes place, and that's how the user stories are basically estimated. At this stage, since this is something which takes place at the start of the sprint, at this stage the team is mostly aware of the stories with highest priority. So you already have the priority of the stories, right? You already know which stories, user stories, are important to be delivered, and you can basically give them importance accordingly, so that you can start off by estimating the efforts required for those stories that have the higher priority. Okay, let's take a look at the 6 steps of planning poker. So you will have to take 6 steps in this entire exercise, starting off with step 1, which is where you as a Scrum Master, you are the moderator of the session, by the way. So you as a Scrum Master, you need to ensure that the deck of cards with valid estimation numbers is given to all the Scrum team members. And what we are talking about here is the entire Scrum team sitting in a team meeting, in a meeting room, and you as a Scrum Master are giving them a deck of cards, and all those cards have a valid estimation number as well, which will be used as a story point at the end of this exercise, right? So this is something that you're doing now. Of course, if your team is not co-located, if you are uh, located in different geographies and cannot come together, then you can use a point scale, you can use a chat software to basically moderate the entire session. But like I said earlier, as a Scrum Master, it is your responsibility to moderate the entire planning poker session. So now step 2 is where the Scrum team goes over each story in the sprint backlog in the order of priority. Remember, we talked about how at this stage the Scrum team is already aware of the priority of the user stories. So the user story with the highest priority, that's the first story that the Scrum team is going to go over. And of course, the product owner is also part of this entire planning poker session, which is basically your sprint planning session. This is where you're doing the planning poker exercise. So the product owner is part of it, and product owner can be consulted to understand more about the user story in question here. So if you're looking at a user story and if you have some questions, you can of course consult the product owner and get your questions answered. That is why it is important to have the product owner be part of your sprint planning session as well and participate in the planning poker exercise as well. You as a scrum master, remember, you're moderating this. It is your responsibility to ensure that product owner also is available in this meeting. Quick reminder, you can check our PM 101 free training out. Head over to pmclounge.com/PM101-Pimbox7 because now it features Pimbox 7 as well. The session has been updated to include content from Pimbox 7. Everything's free. Check it out. Okay, so let's move on to step 3 of the planning poker exercise. Now, once you have the user story or feature, once you have it completely understood, each Scrum team member assigns a story point value by either choosing a card from the deck or the point scale. Remember, if you're working remotely, you may have to choose a point from a point scale as well, which has been pre-decided, of course. If you're in the same room, you can choose a card from the deck. So basically, at this stage, for each user story, let's talk about just one user story right now. So when you're looking at a user story or the feature, each Scrum team member is going to assign a story point value for that particular story. Now, this value is shared with the Scrum team and is representative of the effort required to build the user story. Now, this could be a random number. It could be 2, 3, 4, right? But basically, what's happening here is 2 is representative of lesser effort as compared to, let's say, 8 or 10, which is representative of higher effort, right? So that's how the card from the deck is basically representing the effort required to build that user story. Now, by the way, I hope you do remember the user story, right? You have story points, which is basically part of the user story card itself. You have the title of the user story, and then you have the 3 sentences about the user story, but you also have story points. Now, if you don't remember user story or if you don't know what user story is, the second link in the description, the entire playlist, check that out. There's a video on user story there as well. There's a video that we have done on story points also, so you can check that out. But story points is part of the card used to represent the user stories. So that's where that number, which was basically shared by every single team member, once it is finalized, this is where it is going to show up. All right, let's move on to the next step. So now that you have all the estimates shared by the Scrum team members, in step 4, you are going to take a look at those estimates and you're going to observe if the estimates differ by a wide margin. So let's say most of the team members assigned a story point value of 4 or 5, but there was one team member who assigned this feature with a story point value of 2, and there was another team member who assigned the story point value of 9 for this particular feature. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to ask the person who assigned the highest as well as the lowest story point value for a feature uh, so that they can explain their estimate. So you're going to ask them to explain their estimates because most of the team members have assigned a story point value of 4 or 5. So when they do that, it is possible that the person who assigned a story point value of 2 for a feature, it is possible that they are aware of a way to develop this feature faster and the rest of the team was not able to think like that, right? It is also possible that the person who assigned story point value of 9 for a feature is basically aware of a complexity in that feature that the rest of the team couldn't think of. So that is why it is important to listen to all sides of the story and then arrive at a conclusion on what is the correct story point value for a certain feature. So this step is going to take place only if there is a wide margin in terms of the estimates offered by all the Scrum team members. So moving on to step 5, and this is a step which can be basically repeated if required, because once all the explanations are in, once the team members look at the explanations given by the team members provided who provided the highest and the lowest story point value, and once there is ample discussion that has taken place around that specific feature or the user story, the team gets another chance to choose an estimation card. So they are basically estimating the user story once again after listening to all the explanations, after getting their questions and doubts cleared by the product owner. Now, this can again be done using an estimation card or a software as necessary. And more importantly, this step can actually be repeated if there is still a wide margin in terms of the story points assigned by Scrum team members for a particular feature. All right, let's talk about the final step, which is step 6. And at this stage, when you reach this step, after all the explanations and discussions that have taken place, it is likely that the team converges to a narrow range of story points estimate. So now at this point, your team members are not going to have a wide margin in terms of story point value assigned to a certain user story. And when you repeat this exercise multiple times, let's say 2 or 3 times, it is also possible to reach to a unanimous agreement in terms of what the story point value should be for a certain user story. So step 6 is basically the final step. This is where after you're done with this step, you should have a unanimous agreement as to what the final story point value for a user story should be. So in conclusion, it is important to understand that planning poker is an effective exercise because it is collaborative. That is the number one reason why planning poker wins and why planning poker works. There are discussions that take place throughout this exercise. People explain why they have given a certain estimate for a certain user story. There are discussions between the engineering team and the product owner, and with the help of all these discussions, right, a feature development approach level of details are also brought into the mix. These are the kind of things that are also discussed when you are still in the sprint planning stage itself. So someone explaining their reasoning for the estimation that they have given, they might talk about the feature development approach that will be used, right, as part of developing a certain feature. What is the kind of approach that they are going to use? They might talk about engineering level details. So all that is being discussed while the team is still in sprint planning stage. Now each team member estimates the whole effort and not just his or her part. This is very important. They feel responsible for the entire project because they are estimating the entire project. Essentially they are estimating all the user stories and not just the ones that they are responsible for. This ensures that the team members are not doing the work, are also estimating it, leading to a better understanding of the overall project. So those who are not doing a certain user story, who are not developing or building a certain user story, are also estimating it. This ensures the better understanding of the overall project. So that is why planning poker is so effective. That is why it is so collaborative. That is why planning poker essentially works. Question for this video: how do you handle a situation when the Scrum team cannot agree on a story point value for a user story? You are the moderator of the session. Remember, you are the Scrum Master, you are the moderator here. How are you going to handle this situation? Let me know in the comments. Definitely looking forward to your answers. And this is a good question for a Scrum Master job interview as well. So let me know in the comments. Looking forward to your answers. And that's all that we had in this video. I hope you got value out of it. Smash that like button if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And hit the bell icon to stay notified every time we upload new content. Don't forget to check out our website pmclounge.com. And if you like our work, consider contributing over at pmclounge.com/contribute. Thank you and have a nice day.